Okay, let's do another one with midpoint formula. This is going to be a little bit different though because I'm actually going to give you the midpoint formula and only one endpoint. So the goal is to find the other endpoint. So let's use the formula and use algebra to find out what that other endpoint is, and then we'll match it up to the in your head method and the counting method to see if it lines up, and you can do it either way. So it says that m, which will represent our midpoint, is 6 comma 1. And I know one of my endpoints is negative 2 comma 7. So the question is asking us, what is the other point? So we know that this negative 2 is an x value, and we know that that 7 is a y value. That's all we need to know to be able to plug it in. So if you recall, I can solve any algebraic equation if there's only one missing variable. If there are two missing variables, however, I cannot solve it. I can move it around, I can manipulate it, but I can't actually solve it. So using one of each of these variables, let's go ahead and try and solve the equation. So I know that the midpoint is 6. So 6 is going to have to equal some other part of this equation. We know what x1 is. It's negative 2, so put that there. This, however, though, the x2 value is something that I don't know. That's the unknown. So let's go ahead and just make that x. And that's going to be divided by 2. We have here an algebraic equation that you are able to solve. Now, it looks a little tricky because it looks like a fraction, and it is. So you just use that SAD-MET process that we talked about earlier in the year. Kind of work your way backwards to solve. So if I'm dividing some quantity by 2, the opposite to get rid of that denominator of 2 is to multiply by 2. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides of the equation. That eliminates that entire part. Okay, now I'm going to rewrite the equation. So it's 12 on this side is going to equal negative 2 plus x. Very simple now. It's a one-step equation. You might not be able to see it, but I'm going to do it here anyway. Plus 2. I'm left with x is going to be 14. So that's my missing x value here. So that is the start or halfway of our other endpoint. So I know that it has to be 14 comma something. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing that we did for the x for the y. So I know that my y1 value is 7, and I know that the midpoint is 1. So the midpoint is 1, and I'm going to put 7 for my y1 value. The y2 value, however, I still don't know. I'm going to solve that equation the same exact way, multiply by 2 on both sides. And I'm left with 2 equals 7 plus y. Subtract 7 on both sides of the equation. I'm left with y equals a negative 5. So my point, or my end point, is going to be 14 comma negative 5. Let's leave the answer there and see if we could figure it out just by our mind structure. All right, so I'm going to erase this. So if the endpoint is negative 2 comma 7, we're going to use that same method we used before. So here's the point, and I know that it has to go to some unidentified point here, and I know that the midpoint is going to be 6 comma 1. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what did I do to get from negative 2 to 6? Well, I went along a number line, and I know I had to go 8 units to the right. So if that's halfway through, I'm going to make these two little marks here, which represent that those two parts of the line are equal in distance. I know I'm going to have to add 8 to the 6 to get to 14. So I know my point over here has to be 14, which is already halfway of our equation. Now, to get from 7 to 1, I had to subtract 6. Again, if these two parts of the line are exactly the same, I'm going to subtract 6 again. So 1 minus 6 gives me negative 5. This way is just as effective as this way. However, if you start to get fractions, decimals, or a bunch of negatives, it's really, really easy to make a super easy mistake. Don't make a super easy mistake. Okay? Make sure you do this. Use the formula. Easy.